Okay, I guess it's time to begin. Today we will finish chapter 4. We will go over 4.5, 4.6. Like I said, 4.4 we actually did skip. I don't think it's really that important for you guys to know that. So, never mind. It's not going to be on the exam or on the homework. But 4.5 and 4.6 are kind of important. And they build on the stuff we did before. In particular, remember what we did last time? We did what is known as Boolean standpoint. Boolean gives us modern square of opposition. How did the modern square of opposition work? Well, let's actually refresh the stuff we did last time in case if you forgot. So we have 4 types of proposition. Remember, A, E, I, and O. A is all SRP, E is no SRP, I is some SRP, and O is some S are not P. So based on that, remember we have determined that they have the following relations. These two contradictory and these two are contradictory. Why are they contradictory? You can hopefully see straight from that drawing. Now if this is true, this cannot be true because this one says there's nothing here. It's blocked. This one says there is at least one thing here. So that's why they're contradictory. If this one is true, this one has to be false. This one is false, this one has to be true. Similarly here, this one blocks the middle part. This one says there's something here. So they cannot both be true. That doesn't make any sense. This one true, this one has to be false, and the other way around. So this is the relations we found last time. And remember, this is the Boolean standpoint, so we are not assuming existence. I even kind of mentioned that we will assume it in the future, which is why it matters. And it matters a great deal. So today we will actually do that. We will assume the existence. Remember though, it only applies to these two universal proposition. These two which are particular, we always assume existence because when we are putting an X there, that means that this thing exists. There's at least one thing that exists. For universal, though, we have these two standpoints, Boolean and Aristotelian. And Boolean tells us we never assume existence. What does Aristotelian tell us? Aristotelian tells us we assume existence when we're talking about something which exists. And we do not assume existence when we're talking about things which do not exist, such as witches and unicorns and whatever other stuff which does not exist. So, how do we assume existence? Well, you can even figure it out if you think about it for a second. This is how we show at least one thing exists. So this is what we will be doing. We will be putting this little x here with a circle. And similarly, little x here with a circle. Why in this spot? Well, because we're talking about S-class. And S-class, this part is blocked. So the only part left is the middle. And the middle is where we're going to put x with a circle. Similarly here, this part is blocked. So the only part of S-class left is this one. So we're putting it there. And it turned out that now we have a whole host of new relations, which we did not have before. Now, first of all, between these two, note that now that we have put something here, now they cannot both be true. Before they could, because remember the example with the money, all my money are in my pocket was true if I have no money, and none of my money are in my pocket was also true if I have no money. But as soon as I have this $1, that cannot be true in the same time. Either all of my money are in my pocket, which means this $1, which is all the money I have, it's in my pocket. Okay, it is true. But if it's not there, if it's somewhere else, then of course that will be false. Both of them cannot be true in the same time. Can both of them be false in the same time? Yes, actually both of them can be false in the same time, but they cannot be true in the same time, and that's the rule here. Both of them cannot be true. Similarly here, both of them cannot be false. That's another rule we have. Why can they both be false? Well, we are saying that that exists here and that exists here, so for both of them being false, that would automatically mean that it is neither here or here, so it doesn't exist, and if we said that it assumes existence. So here we actually will have to have this new rule that both of them cannot be false. Couple more rules. Now if this is true, note that this one would have to be true, wouldn't it? Because it says that there is one thing here, and this is what this one says here too. So if all smartphones are wireless devices, it automatically right away means that some smartphones are wireless devices. So this is one more relation we have. If we have truth on top, that truth goes down. And if this is false, then this actually would be shaded, right? There's nothing here. That would have to be false too, again for the same reason, because then it can't have anything there. And the same thing on this side. So if it's true there. If it's false here. And this is the relation which we will add today. We will just go over the slides, but basically that is the gist of the entire lecture today already in a nutshell. It just follows from the existence, which is why it is so important. Okay, so now we adopt this Aristotelian standpoint, which has existential import. We get this new square. It's called traditional square of opposition. Why is it called traditional? Well, because that goes back to Aristotle, right? It's built on his relations when we assume existence. Note that, of course, Aristotle didn't draw it. He did not have any squares. This is something which philosophers did later on, but it just describes the relations he was already talking about. Without drawing the square, you can just talk about the same thing in words, which is what Aristotle did. But drawing the square just makes it a little more clear. With the square and with all these circles, we can immediately graphically see the things he was talking about in words. When you read it in words, it may be very obscure. This way, it is a lot more clear. So this is the relation. And luckily for you, every time there's an exercise in anything, I will have, of course, that. And also on the exam, you can have it because it's an open book exam pretty much. You can have your notes. So just make sure you understand it. And this is how you understand it. This is all the rules. They actually are listed here, and I'm not even removing them. But you have to understand them and know them. So let's go over them one more time. We still have the contradictory. That still is there. And it just means that if we go from this to this, we change truth value. And if we go from this to this, we change the truth value. This is true, this is false. This is false, this is true, and so on. Now, this relation is called contrary. The contrary just says they cannot both be true, like I told you. Can they both be false? Yes. Can one of them be false? Yes. They cannot both be true. This relation is called subcontrary, and it just says these two cannot both be false. Can they both be true? Yes. Can one of them be false? Yes. They just cannot both be false. Subalteration is a relation where you have truth on top, that truth goes on the bottom, meaning if this is true, this one will have to be true. How about if this is false? Then we have no idea what's going to happen on the bottom. It can be either true or false. Only truth goes down. Think of it like a huge chunk of truth here. If you have a huge chunk of truth here, some of it will drip. Same thing on that side. Subalteration, exactly the same thing. Now, how about falsity? Falsity goes up. So if you have falsity here, that one will become false. Equally here, that's just like, in the toilet, the bad stuff which always comes up. The falsity is that bad stuff, it always comes up. Always floats somehow. So if you have falsity on the bottom, it goes up. How about if you have truth here? Then you don't know. Truth does not go up. If this is true, then this one can be true or false. If this is true, this one can be true or false. Only if this is false, then that one has to be false. If this is false, then that one has to be false. And that is all these new relations. And like I said, they are actually described here. Okay, and this is the square, slightly more neat picture. Like if you think about it, once you add that, all these new relations really make sense. They actually work and they can be proven. You can immediately see that if one of them is true, then the other relations fall into place as well. How do we use it? Well, the first rule of thumb is that you always start from the same contradictory relations. So contradictory relations will always work. And if you have contradictory relations, you really don't need anything else. Now, suppose you are given something like all Adlers are Bobkins and you are told it is true. Now, in order for you to use these new relations, one important thing you need to remember that your S-class, in this case Adlers, should actually exist. Now, we don't know if Adlers exist because we don't know what the hell it is. But in most cases, you would have something which does more clearly tell you. But let's assume it exists. So then we can use these new relations. All Adlers are Bobkins being true would immediately by contradiction tell us that some Adlers are not Bobkins is false. That's something which we did even last time. Note that now when we have false on the bottom, we can immediately say that falsity will go up and we will have falsity here. No Adlers are Bobkins will be false. And if no Adlers are Bobkins is false, then some Adlers are Bobkins will be true. So note that by knowing this one, we know all four of them. Not always going to be the case because if you are given all Adlers are Bobkins false, then you really don't know all of them. What do you mean? You're following the rules, right? You're told that this is true, so that one has to be false, right, Sandy? Doesn't it have to be false? And then the new rule, you know, if this is false, falsity goes up, then this one would have to be false too. Isn't it true? Yes. And if this one is false, then again by contradictory, this one has to be true. Note that you can also go the other way. If this is true and truth goes down, then that one will have to be true. And if that is true, then this one will have to be false. So you actually can go several different ways and it will still give you all the correct answers. But like I said, not always, because if you are given all Adlers are Bobkins false, then this two cannot both be true, right? Can this one be true? Yes. Can it be false? Yes. So then that does not give you this answer. So if this is false, this one is true, but that's about all. You cannot say anything about this one or this one. However, well, that is better than nothing, right? So testing immediate inferences. An example. You are given an inference, all Rolex watches are works of art. Therefore, it is false that no Rolex watches are works of art. We start just like we did last time. We are finding where we are on a square. Where are we on a square? A. Right? All Rolex watches are works of art, so we are at A. Where are we going on a square? No Rolex watches are works of art, E. So before, remember, we would say that this is impossible, and therefore the whole thing is invalid. Well, now we can use this traditional square of opposition. We can use this relation and see, can we actually do that? And here we just look at the rule. what the rule says? The rule says both of them cannot be true. Now we have one true. Can this one be false? Yes. Can it be true? No, because it will violate the rule. So we know for sure what that one is, don't we? It is false. And hey, that's what we are told. So actually, that means it's a valid inference, because it actually follows from this relation with 100% certainty. Okay, remember that in using these new relations in Aristotelian Standpoint, you have to do one more thing. Do not forget that. What is this thing? You should check if your S-class exists. Do Rolex watches exist? Yes. So now we are done. Now we can say that it is valid from Aristotelian Standpoint. Another example. We are given something like this. Some viruses are structures that attack T cells. Therefore, some viruses are not structures that attack T cells. So where do we start? At I. Where do we go? To O. This is true, and we are told this is also true. Is it valid? Is it? Okay, this is how you do it. This is important to understand. The rule says they cannot both be false. This is already true. Can this one be true? Yes. Can this one be false? Would it violate the rule that they cannot both be false? It would not violate the rule, so it can be true. So it can be either true or false. So we don't know what the hell it is. And if we don't know what the hell it is, we cannot say that it is valid, because for all we know, it could be false, and they are telling us it is true. So every time you have this kind of ambiguity, whether it could be true or false, and you don't know which one it is, you cannot say it is valid. The rule has to put you into a corner, so to say. And you may think it's bad to be in a corner, but in this case it's actually good to be in a corner, because it means the rule forces you to one concrete answer, and that tells you whether or not they got it right with their inference. But if the rule doesn't do that, if there is like, oh, it could be this, it could be that, remember we did that at the beginning of the class many times, and every time I tell you, if you don't know what the answer is, it's invalid. We are talking about strict necessity. It has to be strictly necessary that it follows. If it doesn't follow with strict necessity, it's junk. It's no good for us, and therefore it is invalid. And now we also have an additional name for that. It works very simple. It's invalid, and because it's supposed to be a subcontrary relation, we call it illicit subcontrary. Now, equally, if we were going here, what would that be? Well, let me spare you the drama. Illicit contrary. How about this one? If we did that, and it is also invalid. Illicit subalteration. Okay, so that's the new names for these relations. If you do it validly, then it's just valid. But if you do it invalidly, then it is illicit, whatever it is. Illicit contrary, illicit subalteration, illicit subcontrary. We do not say illicit contradictory, because illicit contradictory is just invalid. But with these new ones, we do name them this way. Illicit contrary, illicit subalteration. Yeah, that's the other two names. So this is the examples of illicit contrary. You are given all A or B false, and you are told therefore no A or B. You are checking their logic. You are checking whether they are correct, whether the rule puts them into a corner. The rule is they cannot both be true. They are told that this is false. Can this one be true? Yes. Can it be false? Yes. Does the rule put you into a corner? No. therefore it is invalid, and it is illicit contrary. Right? So similarly here, if you're going the other way from no A or B false to all A are B, that would again be illicit contrary. Illicit subcontrary, similar thing. You are told some A are B, therefore it is false that some A are not B. So you start in here. The rule is they cannot both be false, but this one is true. So this one can be false, but it can also be true. And they are telling you this is false. But they can't know that because the rule does not put them into that corner. Both options are open. And therefore they, whoever they are wrong. And they making a mistake, it's invalid, and it is illicit subcontrary. Illicit subalteration, again, you are supposed to follow the rule. If the rule tells you what's happening and they follow the rule, then it is valid. Let's see. Some A are not B, so you're starting from O, therefore no A are B. So they are going here. Remember, only falsity goes up, but some A are not B is by definition true, by default. So we don't know what will happen on top. And they are telling us that it is true on top. But how do they know that? They don't know that. So again, it is invalid and it is illicit subalteration. Okay. Now, remember, this is also important. Every single time we use these new relations, the step after you determined whether or not that follows the rule is additional step to figure out whether your S class exists. If it does not exist, then you do not have any of these new relations. You cannot do them. And we call it existential fallacy. So that would be another way to call something. If you can go, like in this case, some A are not B, therefore no A are B. Let's say you are told some A are not B, therefore it is false that no A are B. So you go in, well, it is false that some A are not B, therefore it is false that no A are B. Okay, now you would be doing valid subalteration. But suppose you are told that A are witches. Well, then it is actually existential fallacy. Every single time you would be doing any of that, you would be going from universal to particular. And remember, universal to particular just means that your top part would be shaded and your bottom part would have an X. It does not necessarily mean that your top part would always be all or no. Why not? Because if it says it is false that some A are B, that becomes universal. You're changing an X to shading, so now it's universal. So every time you're going from universal to particular, you have these additional relations. Okay, let's look at some examples. The following inference commits existential fallacy. All witches who fly on broomsticks are fearless women. Therefore, some witches who fly on broomsticks are fearless women. Now, there's no problem going back to the square, going from here to here. If this is true, and by default it's true, this one is also true, right? So that would be subalteration. Wouldn't be a problem, except we're talking about witches, and witches don't exist. So that is existential fallacy. Similarly, no wizards with magical powers are malevolent beings. Therefore, it is false that all wizards with magical powers are malevolent. Jesus. Malevolent. Why can't I say that? Malevolent beings. Yeah. Cat was in the background. Yeah, he was sleeping on the window and then decided to go have a snack. Now he's having a snack. I don't know if you can hear that. But let's concentrate on work for now. So anyway, this is existential fallacy. Note, again, this is like a nice little table. we can have Boolean and Aristotelian. From Boolean, going from all cats to animals, some cats are animals is invalid, existential fallacy. Going from all unicorns are animals to some unicorns are animals, also invalid and also existential fallacy. Why? Because remember, Boolean, we cannot assume that cats exist. We by default cannot go from universal to particular, period. But from Aristotelian standpoint, this one is actually valid because cats exist. So by saying all cats are animals, we can validly say that it is also true that some cats are animals. However, with the Aristotelian standpoint, when you say all unicorns are animals, therefore some unicorns are animals, you are committing existential fallacy because unicorns do not exist. Now, you may wonder, suppose we don't know if something exists. Then what? Then what would be known as conditionally valid, conditional validity. That is something we, again, in Aristotelian standpoint, can say about stuff we don't know if that exists or not. So, just an example. Suppose tomorrow, no, not tomorrow. The exam is what? Next week, Thursday. So suppose next week, Friday, I am not looking at the results, but I say all students who failed the exam are students on probation. Therefore, some students who failed the exam are students on probation. Note that at that point, I may not know yet whether there are any students who failed the exam. And there may not be any students who failed the exam. Unlikely, but possible. So that would be conditionally valid. That would be conditionally valid on a condition that there really are students who failed the exam. And in every single situation when we do not know whether our S class exists, that is always considered conditionally valid from Aristotelian standpoint, well, assuming we're going from universal to particular. In cases when you don't have anything there, like instead of students or whatever, you just have A and B, and obviously A and B can stand for anything, that will always be conditionally valid. So all A are B, therefore it is false that no A or B is conditionally valid. What is the condition? Condition that A exists. And once you know what A is, you can determine, hopefully, its existence. And if you never know, then it will forever be just conditionally valid. Okay, now let's do some exercises. This is the best way to, first of all, learn this stuff well, and second of all, get your last bunch of extra credit. The previous section get a very juicy bunch of extra credit, and hopefully you guys can too. We have at this point 2 people with maximum. Sandy, you do have maximum, and also Martin has maximum. The rest of you guys still have a room for additional extra credit. So I'm hoping you are listening, and I'm hoping you are understanding. So this is the question here. You are just supposed to use the relations. Yeah, I'm sure somebody can. Like I said, the previous section got a whole bunch. So assume this relation and see whether, based on what you're told, the result will be, and you have 3 options. The result can be true, the other proposition can be true, the other proposition can be false, or it can be undetermined. Undetermined is basically if you cannot make any determination as to its truth and falsity. So this is the first option. You are given, if all fashion fads are products of commercial brainwashing is false, what would be the truth value of no fashion fads are products of commercial brainwashing? And remember, you have 3 options, true, false, and undetermined. So just give me one of these 3. Sandy, you can just do it for yourself. Just write down your answer and wait for us to reveal the result. People who have maximum can always do that. I never say you can't participate. By all means participate, just don't give me the answer in the chat. But you can definitely try for yourself. And you should. Well, you forgot what the third option was. Oh, come on, Sarah. I already said true is not correct. So it is undetermined. Good job, Kevin. I'm guessing you just guessed, but well, fair enough. It is the correct answer, though. Second extra credit for Kevin. Yes, look, you are here and it is false. You are going here. The rule is cannot both be true. But if this is true, false, can this one be true? Yes. Can it be false? Yes. So can you determine what it is? No. So it is undetermined. Okay. Let's try one more. Same exact question. Note that you're also starting from here false. It's just the other part is different. So yes, why is it undetermined? Let's see. We are here and it is false. We are going here. It is actually subalteration and not subcontrary. But what happens? The rule for going from A to I is truth goes down. Do we have truth here? No, we don't. We have falsity. Do we know what happens if we have falsity? We have no idea what happens if we have falsity. That's why it is undetermined. Okay. Second one. And now the last one. Again, exactly the same question. Hopefully this time somebody gets it without guessing. Yes. Great. That is true. It does have to be true because note that this is contradictory relations. And contradictory just changes the true value. So if you have false here, that one has to be true. You don't need to worry about anything else. Okie dokie. Let's do a slightly different exercise now. And that would be based on the same principle. But now we will be looking at valid or invalid. And if it is invalid, tell me what are the name of the fallacy. So it could be something like valid, or it could be something like invalid, illicit subalteration, or invalid existential fallacy. So every time you give me invalid, I need the name of the fallacy. Otherwise, of course, if it's valid, you don't have to say anything. Okay, so the first one here is we starting from it is false that no jailhouse informants are people who can be trusted, and the conclusion is therefore some jailhouse informants are not people who can be trusted. So valid or invalid, and if it is invalid, what fallacy is committed? Remember that subalteration is not a fallacy. The fallacy is called illicit subalteration. So unfortunately, okay, then there will be more possibilities for extra credit. Fine. That one I will have to not count for anybody, but maybe next time we can do it, because I almost gave the answer anyway. So it is almost correct, but it is illicit subalteration. Illicit. If it is not, if just subalteration, that is not a fallacy. The relation is of subalteration, the fallacy of illicit subalteration. So would have been correct. But you have to be careful about that. There is no fallacy subalteration. The fallacy is called illicit subalteration. So why? You're going from E to O. Yet that can only be done if you have truth on top, and then truth will be on the bottom. But you have falsity on top, so you cannot do it. And for this reason it is invalid, and it is illicit subalteration. Like I said, I cannot accept just subalteration, especially since the first time you have used the correct wording, illicit subcontrary, except it was not illicit subcontrary. But you have to be careful about mentioning the fact that it is illicit. Otherwise, yeah. Okay, well, there is one more. So let's see if you can get this one. Why the question mark? Well, I'm gonna consider it an answer, and it is the correct answer. So good job. But like, why would you put a question mark there? Anyway, yes, it is valid. You're going from A, all homemakers are people with real jobs, to E, no homemakers are people with real jobs, and well, the rule is they cannot both be true, but A is already true. So that forces you to have false here. You cannot have another true here. And you have a false here. So for this reason, no, but I mean, that's the process of learning, right? You are getting better at it. Great. Just because you gave the wrong answer once doesn't mean you should feel bad about I can never try. Yeah, good job. So just apply the rules. The rule here clearly tells you that it has to be valid, so it is valid. One more step. I don't know if you did that. In this case, obviously the answer is correct, but never forget, you have to check one more thing since you are getting valid. If it's invalid, then doesn't matter. But if you get invalid, does your S class exist? And in this case, of course, homemakers, they exist. But in some other cases, and I can warn you, there may be a problem today in one of the other problems, when if you don't do that last step, you will get the incorrect answer. But in this case, it's just valid. Okay, last one. Do this one. Another extra credit for somebody. Like I said, very, very good crop of extra credit today. Just apply the rules, use your logic, and you will get it. Well, you shouldn't worry too much about the statements themselves, but well, we'll talk about it once we get the right answer. If you apply it on the square gives you the answer right away. It's more or less kind of like automatic process. This is what computers are built on, right? They just follow the rules of logic. They don't think. We do think, and sometimes we think too much, and that's the problem. But here you just follow the rules. Well, Dainara, did you listen to what I was telling Kevin? Looks like Kevin listened to what I was telling him, but not you did not. Subcontrary is not a fallacy. If it's invalid, it cannot be subcontrary. If it's invalid, it has to be illicit subcontrary, and that is the correct answer. So Kevin does get another extra credit, but not Dainara, because once again, okay, yeah, that your process of thinking is correct, but you have to give the correct answer too. So some campus romances are episodes plagued by violence. Therefore, some campus romances are not episodes plagued by violence. The rule here is they cannot both be false. But this one is true, so this one can be false. It can also be true. And for this reason, it is a fallacy, and it is illicit subcontrary. Not subcontrary. Subcontrary is just a relation. The fallacy is illicit subcontrary. So you have to make sure that you actually use the correct wording. Now let's think about it in terms of just what it says, right? Not about the square. So the logic here is this. If you are saying some campus romances are episodes plagued by violence, you are assuming that there is at least one campus romance which had violence, right? Does that by itself mean that there are some other campus romances which do not have violence? No, it doesn't. It's possible that there was only one episode and it had violence, and that's it. Isn't it possible? That would be true with the first statement, but then the second statement would not follow from that. Now, it's impossible that both. That is impossible. That's why it says that they cannot both be false. Because think about it. If it's false that some campus romances are episodes plagued by violence, and there is at least one campus romance, that campus romance then automatically would have to be the one without violence. Because it either has violence or it doesn't. There really is no other option. So for this reason, they cannot both be false, but they can be both true. So it's not just the square, it's the language which tells us this. But I prefer at this point, because it is formal logic, I prefer you guys not to think too much about what the argument says, because that may be harder than working with the square. The square actually forces you to get the correct answer. The square tells you the rules, and it's like very straightforward kind of stuff. Whereas if you start wondering about campus romances and such, you will get confused. Okay, so 4.6, that's actually very easy extension of what we have done before. For this reason, we're not going to spend very much time on it, but that just follows exactly from what has been said. Remember, we did that second way of testing them last time, and this is by drawing Venn diagrams, right? So we draw the Venn diagrams, and now we also, just like I did on the board, have this additional step, that if on top we have universal premise, which means the shading either here or here, after testing it from Boolean, we can also put this x in a circle and test it one more time from Aristotelian. And that's all there is to it. So that will be based on the same relations of the same square. So this is the process. First test from Boolean, just like we did last time, and hopefully you remember. So if you have it valid from Boolean, if you have the x in the correct spot, then no problemo, you're done. It's just valid. But if you have universal on top, means your two circles on top have shading, and particular on the bottom, meaning your bottom two circles have an x, no matter where, then you can take this additional step and put an x in a circle on top, either to the right or to the left of the shading, depending on what you have. If you have this situation, you put an x with a circle here. If you have this situation, you put it here. And then you retest it. And now you're just looking to have the x in the same place. So if you have an x in the same place, then it is conditionally valid. Condition is again being that whatever is your x should exist. So in other words, your S class should exist. If your S class doesn't exist, then it's existential fallacy. If your S class does exist, then it is valid. If you don't know if it exists or not, then it is conditionally valid. So this is an example. Suppose you are given something like this. All A are B, therefore some A are B. Note that we can do it with the square, but it's just a different way to do the same thing. We draw all A are B, we shade the left part. We draw some A are B, we put an X here. Remember that if it is false, we would have to do what? Instead of shading, we would have an X. Instead of X, we would put a shading. But in this case, nothing is false, so we don't do that. We just copy exactly what we have on the board. We copy them, and then we test them from Boolean. It's not valid from Boolean, because you have shading here, you have X here, so they don't. This one doesn't follow from the other one. And before we would say just that it is invalid. Now we can do the second step. We put an X with a circle here. So we are assuming existence. And assuming existence, that comes up valid because we have X here and X here. You may say, oh, but this one has shading. But never mind shading. Shading in this case doesn't matter. As long as it has the X in the right spot, it is valid. So it is conditionally valid from Aristotelian. What's the condition of that? The condition is your A class must exist. Note in this case we will never know because it just says all A are B. What is A? We don't know. So it will just be conditionally valid. Suppose we're given this example. No penguins are birds that can fly, therefore it is false that all penguins are birds that can fly. We again, following the process, the top, no PRB, we just shade the middle. The bottom, well, it is all penguins are birds that can fly, so we would be shading this side, except it is false. And if it is false, we are putting an X instead of a shading. And if it was X, we would be putting shading instead of an X, remember? Now we have shading on top and X on the bottom. So we are going from universal to particular. Note that it is much better test to see shading on top, X on the bottom, than to try to figure out whether it is universal or particular based on all, no, and some, because false actually turns universal to particular. So we do have universal to particular. Okay, great. Is it valid from Boolean? No, because it has shading here, it has X here, so not valid. So what do we do next? Next, we have a right to put an X with a circle where? Inside P circle where it doesn't have a shading. So right here. Boom. We did that. So now we retest it and we discover that actually the X is in the right spot. So therefore it is conditionally valid from Aristotelian. The last step is to figure out whether our S-class exists. And our S-class in this case is what? Penguins. Remember, it is penguins. No, penguins are birds. Do penguins exist? Yes. So we are done and we can say that it actually is valid from Aristotelian. Another example. All sugar plum fairies are delicate creatures, therefore some sugar plum fairies are delicate creatures. We tested from Boolean, it is invalid. We put an X with a circle. Now it looks valid conditionally, but is condition satisfied? Does our X class exist? No. Sorry to disappoint you guys, sugar plum fairies do not exist. And so for this reason, that would be known as existential fallacy. So it is existential fallacy from Aristotelian. Okie dokie. Let's do the exercises. That's all we have left, and it will give a bunch of you guys another opportunity for extra credit, and for some of you just an opportunity to test your knowledge. Okay, so this is slightly more challenging than we did a few minutes ago, but the same principle, and the question is just true, false, undetermined for this 3 in this case. So instead of one answer like I did last time, I'm looking for 3 answers. For each one of them, you have to give me either true or false or undetermined. A, B, and C. Don't have to put A, B, and C. That doesn't matter. You can just put them one after the other. But I need 3 words. Each one of these words should be either true, false, or undetermined. So it could be like true, undetermined, false, or false, true, undetermined, or true, 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 or whatever. And if it is correct, you get extra credit. Well, we will find out whether you are right. Hopefully soon. But there's still plenty of time. And like I said, last extra credits, guys. Come on. You will need it. You will enjoy having it for the exam. Just apply the rules. The rules are all here, right here. It even says so. Just apply them. Somehow Dainara's answer just popped up. That is still incorrect. Even though it kind of jumped up. But doesn't matter. Incorrect. See, when there's 3 of them, it's very difficult to accidentally get it right. You really have to do the work. Yeah. In case you're wondering, you have 27 possible combinations, which means to get it accidentally, you have approximately 4% chance. 3 point something. So, not gonna get it by accident. Nope, that is incorrect. And by the way, you are again given second answer in a row, which, like I said, is not allowed. Note that Sandy didn't give any answer, so even though her words are there, but those are not answers. She's just talking about stuff. You have to let somebody else answer. Okay, Kevin got it. False, false, true. Let's take a look together. So, you're starting from here, right? You're told it is true. You're starting from here. You're told it is true. And you go into A. The rule here is they cannot both be true. You already have one true. What's the other one has to be? It can only be false. There's no other way around it. It's not undetermined. If you have true here, and they cannot both be true, naturally that one will be false. Now once that one is false, what else can we say? We can say that some string operations are not, would be true, wouldn't it? Because it has to be true. And since that one is true, what can we say about this one? It has to be false. So it is false, false, true. Okay, good job, Kevin. That's your 4th extra credit. Like I said, it is pretty hard to guess it. You actually have to follow the rules. But if you follow them, see how easy it is. It's all there. And by the way, just before we go to the next one, side note. Last year when the whole shutdown thing happened, we just were supposed to start chapter 4. And unfortunately, I was not able to start it, but it all switched online, and at the time I didn't have a webcam. I couldn't really do anything about it. I went on Amazon, and believe it or not, all the webcams were gone, because people were buying them like crazy for, I guess, similar reasons. So I didn't give any videos to my students. I just uploaded the PowerPoints, and they were totally confused, because without doing this exercise in class, it's very hard to figure out what's going on. But I felt helpless. It took me like a couple of weeks to get the webcam sent from China, and they were also selling it at like double the price. And then I started recording those videos there, which you can still find for the future, starting from like chapter 6, I think. But for chapter 5, for chapter 4, I had nothing. I couldn't do anything. They very suddenly said, okay, well, starting from Monday, CSN is shut down, and everything goes online. Yeah, that was a total mess, and it's like, how do we do that now? And then students actually left, in the end of class feedback, and I read that they were upset by the fact that they were confused, and I was like, what? I couldn't do anything. Like, I didn't even have the webcam. What could I do? Anyway, now it's a little bit better because we at least are prepared. Fine, so this is the correct answer. Let's do this exercise. And this is similar. You determine valid or invalid. And if it is invalid, you tell me what fallacies are committed. Remember, we did that already one by one. And now you have to do it for all these 3. All 3, check them and figure out if it is valid, then that can be existential fallacy. But otherwise, if it's not an existential fallacy, then it could be one of the other fallacies, which is illicit something. And I need 3 answers for all 3 of them, right? And that would be something like that would be something like well, in each case, if it is a fallacy, you would have to name the fallacy. You don't really want to give too many options, but the idea is that if it is a fallacy, you have to give me the fallacy. And if there's no fallacy, then it is valid. Okay, we can't spend any more time. Number 6 is wrong. Number 6 is valid. Look, some pornographic publications are materials, so you are here and you're going to no pornographic, which of course would make it false. So that's just a valid relation. Sorry guys, that's the only problem there. Otherwise it is correct that this is an existential fallacy. It would be valid, but two fairies do not exist. And this is valid, but number 6 you got wrong. Okay, well, the reason I still want to talk about the last one, because the last one is with those circles. So let's do the top one together. Note that all you need to do is to draw the damn circles. Yeah, I understand, but so let me do this on the board, because otherwise I don't know if you guys would understand. Yeah, so we have some A or B files. How do we do that? Remember, some A or B has an X in the middle. Since it is false, we are changing it to shading. So it is shaded in the middle. Okay, and next one is all A or B false. So now all A or B would be shading on the left side, but because it is false, we put an X instead of the shading. Okay? Now, it's invalid from Boolean. We re-examine it from Aristotelian after we put the X where? Here. And we can do it because we have universal on top, particular on the bottom. Shading, X. Note that this is of course particular, but when it's false it becomes universal. So just look, shading, X, that's good enough. Now that we put an X here, we re-examine it and it comes up valid. So it is conditionally valid. Okay? Conditionally, because we don't know what A is, right? So it can only be conditionally valid. Okay, there's no more time left. So this is how you do it, and in a similar way you can do the other two. And unfortunately there's like practically no time. Well, I'll give you 1 minute. Can anybody give me the answers for them? Just draw them for yourself and give me the answers. So think about it, like no, it's false with no A or B. No A or B would be what? Shading in the middle, but it is false, so what's in the middle? X is in the middle. How about this one? So what's the answer for 3? Can you say it already? You have X here in the middle, and here you definitely have X in the middle because it's not false. So is it valid? Yes, it is valid. So we are out of time. This would be the answer. These two come up valid, and these two come up invalid because some A are BX, some A are not B invalid. Okay, so this is all the time we have.